Ilara Voss woke screaming, but there was no sound. Her mouth moved, her lungs strained, but nothing came out. Around her stretched a gray field of shifting ash and cold wind. The world bent unnaturally, like a broken simulation trying to remember how reality worked. Then she remembered. This wasn't real. Not exactly. The Malvarak, a Drex harvest ship. She'd been part of the Lysander Recon Patrol, a deep space mission sweeping abandoned trade lanes beyond Proxima Gate. Their last transmission was garbled static and a rising pitch that made the comms officer bleed from the ears. Then, nothing. Until now. She wasn't in a Drex cell, not physically. She was trapped inside her own fear, a living nightmare crafted by the Drex to break her mind, and she wasn't alone. Shapes moved in the ash, warped shadows of her crew, faces. She knew, staggered toward her. Their eyes were gone, mouths torn open in silent screams, memories twisted into monsters. "Ilara," one rasped, "you left us to die." "I didn't," she whispered, retreating. "I tried to, but—" The figures lunged, pulling her down into the dust. Their hands burned like betrayal. Ilara clawed free and ran, deeper into the false world, her heart pounding like a war drum. She knew this wasn't real, but that didn't stop it from hurting. That was the Drex's genius. They didn't torture the body. They tortured the soul, and it should have worked. But Ilara Voss wasn't like the others. On the outside, on the Malvarak's operating deck, dozens of humans floated lifeless in neurochambers. Most twitched and convulsed as fear fed the Drex fear engines. A few were already still. Minds collapsed under the weight of dream terror. Ilara's vitals spiked, then steadied. Then, something unexpected happened. She smiled. Her brain activity surged beyond predictive thresholds. Neural pathways fused into new patterns. She wasn't breaking. She was reprogramming the nightmare. Inside the dream, the shadows stopped chasing her. The sky cracked open, light piercing the ash. And Ilara remembered who she was. Captain of the Lysander Patrol, trained in psychic defense, experienced in alien tech. A survivor. "No more running," she whispered. The world around her rippled. The ash dissolved. The fake memories peeled away. The nightmare collapsed inward. And Ilara Voss woke up. Screams tore through the Drex bridge as bio-alarms flared. Ilara burst from her neural cocoon, ripping the interface cables from her skull. Her body was weak, starved, but her mind blazed like fire. The Drex technician closest to her reached for a containment spike. She broke its jaw with a stolen boot. Ilara stumbled across the chamber, grabbing what she could: clothing, a neural shard, a half-charged plasma cutter. The Drex weren't warriors. They were harvesters, engineers of suffering, not soldiers. Still, one tackled her near the bulkhead. She jammed the cutter into its eye. The thing twitched once, then stopped moving. Breathing hard, Ilara stared at the room. The twitching humans still trapped in dream pods. She wanted to help them, but alarms screamed across the Malvarak now. She had seconds, maybe minutes. A stasis pod launch bay yawned open. Ilara ran. The pod screamed out into space, shaking as the harvest ship behind her collapsed under its own failing systems. Whatever she'd done in the mental web, it hadn't just freed her, it had broken the engine. She looked back once, through the pod's viewport. The Malvarak drifted like a wounded animal, flickering with power failures and overloaded biochambers, and, in her mind, Ilara felt something stirring, a residue, a presence. Part of the Drex's mental construct hadn't let go. It had followed her out. But it wasn't attacking. It was listening. She smiled. They thought she'd be another broken memory, another file in their archive of conquered minds. Instead, she'd become something else, Something new, something they would come to fear. The pod's thrusters flickered weakly as it coasted toward the fringe outpost known as Salvage Station K7, a forgotten hub where scavengers, refugees, and drifters eked out survival beyond the reach of the core worlds. Ilara slumped in the cramped cockpit, body trembling from exhaustion, mind still buzzing with the ghost of the Drex nightmare. The station's sensors caught her long before she could send a proper distress signal. The automated beacon blinked, a pulse of hope in the cold void. Inside the command deck, a scrappy salvage crew caught sight of the pod's signature. It was human, but different. Something in the readings set their nerves on edge. Incoming pod on auto dock, crackled the comms console. The ship's captain, Raina Beck, stared at the feed. A woman alone, gaunt, eyes wild with something between terror and fire. "Looks like a ghost," Raina muttered, signaling her crew. "Get medics ready." Ilara's pod clattered into the dock with a shudder. The airlock hissed open, and she collapsed into the waiting arms of two medics. Her body was fragile, but her mind was an unbroken fortress. Who are you?" a medic asked. "Ilara Voss," she whispered. "I escaped the Drex." The room fell silent. The Drex were legends, nightmare monsters from the deep galactic shadows, known for harvesting minds to fuel their war machines. No one had ever returned. Over the next days, Ilara tried to piece together what she remembered. The Drex's ships, silent, brutal, and omnipresent. Their nightmare realms where the mind was weaponized and preyed upon. The mental virus she carried now, like a ghost in her synapses, whispering Drex secrets she wasn't sure she wanted to know. She struggled with the visions. Alien ships, star systems mapped in psychic pain, and worst of all, the feeling that something inside her was still listening. Raina, the salvage ship's engineer, was the first to notice. "You're different," Raina said carefully, studying Ilara's neural scans. "This isn't just trauma. It's like you've been rewired." Ilara nodded. "The Drex use fear to control us, to feed their engines, but I fought back inside their dreamscape. I crashed their system from the inside. When I woke, I felt it, their hive mind. I think I brought part of it back." Their unease deepened when the station's sensors picked up an approaching Drex patrol. Ship on intercept. "Course," barked the lookout. "They're scanning for us." Ilara's eyes snapped open. "They're after me." Raina's crew scrambled to ready their defenses. It was a desperate situation. An unarmed salvage ship against a Drex hunter squadron was a death sentence. But Ilara had a plan. Using the fragmented knowledge she'd recovered from the Nightmare Network, Ilara guided the crew into a shadow run through an asteroid belt. The Drex ships, massive and relentless, pursued without hesitation. Ilara's mind reached out, feeding back into the brief psionic link she'd retained from the Drex. She sent false images, false signals, fragments of nightmare, baiting their systems to chase ghosts. It worked. The Drex ships hesitated, caught in illusions of endless corridors and looping horrors that shattered their protocols. In the confusion, the salvage crew slipped away. After the skirmish, Raina looked at Ilara with new respect. "You're not just a survivor," she said. "You're a weapon." Ilara's jaw tightened. "I'm not done," she said. "They're hunting all of us, humans and others. They feed on fear, but I learned their weakness. I'm going to use it. I'm going to hunt them down. I'll turn their nightmares into their grave." That night, as the salvage station K7 drifted beneath 1,000 alien stars, Ilara stared out at the darkness beyond. The nightmare wasn't over. It was just beginning. The deep silence of Sekis 9's archive vault was broken only by the soft hum of ancient data cores spinning to life. The world itself was a monument to forgotten knowledge. Vast libraries buried beneath glass domes, relics of civilizations that had risen and fallen like stars. Ilara Voss stepped cautiously into the archive's central chamber, flanked by Raina Beck and Raina. The three had traveled far from the salvage station, chasing threads of data she had plucked from the Drex. Nightmare Web. The Drex were not mere invaders. They were predators of the mind, creatures evolved to weaponize trauma and fear itself. And the map she carried wasn't a star chart. It was a labyrinth of memories, emotions, and terror. Inside the vault, they met the archive's last historian, a frail alien named Trelix. His eyes, pale and clouded, seemed to pierce through the layers of Ilara's mind. "You bear the mark of the nightmare survivor," he said softly. "Few have returned from the Drex's mindscapes. Fewer still without succumbing." Ilara nodded. "They hunt fear. They map the terror of billions to find the weakest minds. I brought part of that map back. I need to understand it." Trelix gestured toward a holographic projection, a shifting web-like structure glowing with pulsing nodes. "This is the map of fear," he explained. "A psychic network the Drex have built across the galaxy. Each node represents a mind. Each connection a nightmare exploited. They weave it into a net, a control mechanism, a source of power." Ilara's eyes narrowed. "If I can follow this map, I can track their network." "But beware," Trelix warned. "The map is built from pain. To traverse it is to relive every horror it contains. Madness claims many who attempt the journey." Determined, Ilara immersed herself in the neural interface connected to the map. The world dissolved once again into shifting nightmarescapes, terrifying landscapes where time bent and memories became monsters. Her mind was pulled into fragments of ancient wars, screams of lost souls, and shadowy figures that whispered despair. Each node of the map revealed a new nightmare, feeding the Drex's power and control. But Ilara was no longer a victim. She began to learn the patterns, the hidden flaws in the map's weave. The Drex were powerful, but their system depended on predictable fear responses. Human minds, chaotic and resilient, could bend those patterns. With careful focus, Ilara rewrote sections of the map, creating illusions within illusions, traps within traps. Back in the real world, Raina and Raina monitored her vitals closely. The strain was immense, but Ilara pressed on, guided by the promise of turning the Drex's own power against them. When she finally emerged, hours later, sweat, drenched and breath ragged, she held a new conviction. "I can lead us to their outposts," she said, "not through space, but through the nightmare network itself." Raina's eyes widened. "You want to hunt them in their own mind space?" Ilara smiled, a fierce light burning in her gaze. "Yes. The Drex may have thought they were hunting prey, but they never counted on one of us becoming the hunter." Their first target was a minor Drex outpost, hidden on the edge of known space. Ilara's understanding of the map allowed the salvage crew to slip past patrols and traps, using nightmare distortions to cloak their approach. As they closed in, Ilara prepared herself for what came next. The Drex would try to trap her again, drag her back into the nightmare realm, but this time, she would be ready. The hunt had begun. The deep silence of Psychus 9's archive vault was broken only by the soft hum of ancient data cores spinning to life. The world itself was a monument to forgotten knowledge. Vast libraries buried beneath glass domes, relics of civilizations that had risen and fallen like stars. Ilara Voss stepped cautiously into the archive's central chamber, flanked by Raina, Beck, and Raina. The three had traveled far from the salvage station, chasing threads of data she had plucked from the Drex nightmare web. The Drex were not mere invaders. They were predators of the mind, creatures evolved to weaponize trauma and fear itself. And the map she carried wasn't a star chart. It was a labyrinth of memories, emotions, and terror. Inside the vault, They met the archive's last historian, a frail alien named Trelix. His eyes, pale and clouded, seemed to pierce through the layers of Ilara's mind. "You bear the mark of the nightmare survivor," he said softly. "Few have returned from the Drex's mindscapes. Fewer still without succumbing." Ilara nodded. "They hunt fear. They map the terror of billions to find the weakest minds. I brought part of that map back. I need to understand it." Trelix gestured toward a holographic projection, a shifting web-like structure glowing with pulsing nodes. "This is the map of fear," he explained. "A psychic network the Drex have built across the galaxy. Each node represents a mind. Each connection a nightmare exploited. They weave it into a net, a control mechanism, a source of power." Ilara's eyes narrowed. "If I can follow this map, I can track their network." "But beware," Trelix warned. "The map is built from pain. To traverse it is to relive every horror it contains. Madness claims many who attempt the journey." Determined, Ilara immersed herself in the neural interface connected to the map. The world dissolved once again into shifting nightmarescapes, terrifying landscapes where time bent and memories became monsters. Her mind was pulled into fragments of ancient wars, screams of lost souls, and shadowy figures that whispered despair. Each node of the map revealed a new nightmare, feeding the Drex's power and control. But Ilara was no longer a victim. She began to learn the patterns, the hidden flaws in the map's weave. The Drex were powerful, but their system depended on predictable fear responses. Human minds, chaotic and resilient, could bend those patterns. With careful focus, Ilara rewrote sections of the map, creating illusions within illusions, traps within traps. Back in the real world, Reyna monitored her vitals closely. The strain was immense, but Ilara pressed on, guided by the promise of turning the Drex's own power against them. When she finally emerged, hours later, sweat, drenched and breath ragged, she held a new conviction. "I can lead us to their outposts," she said. "Not through space, but through the nightmare network itself." Reyna's eyes widened. "You want to hunt them in their own mind space?" Ilara smiled, a fierce light burning in her gaze. "Yes. The Drex may have thought they were hunting prey, but they never counted on one of us becoming the hunter." Their first target was a minor Drex outpost, hidden on the edge of known space. Ilara's understanding of the map allowed the salvage crew to slip past patrols and traps, using nightmare distortions to cloak their approach. As they closed in, Ilara prepared herself for what came next. The Drex would try to trap her again, drag her back into the nightmare realm. But this time, she would be ready. The hunt had begun. Ilara's eyes scanned the flickering holomap aboard the Wraith. Each glowing node represented a Drex stronghold, a twisted fortress of psychic torment and control. But one marker pulsed brighter than the rest, an ancient, abandoned sector, near Earth's system. She swallowed hard. The Drex had remembered Earth. The invasion of Earth had been a whispered legend for decades, a near myth told in shadowed corridors. The Drex had swept past human colonies in the outer systems, harvesting minds, growing stronger, but Earth had remained untouched, its defenses a mystery. Until now, Ilara and her crew plotted a course for Earth's orbit, tension thick in the ship's cramped corridors. "This could be a trap," Reyna warned, her fingers dancing across the console. "If the Drex are focusing on Earth, they're preparing for something big." Ilara nodded. "Or they're afraid of us. I need to see what they've left behind, what nightmares they're building." As the Wraith dropped out of hyperspace, near Earth's moon, a shadow loomed, a Drex dreadnought, a massive warship etched with nightmare glyphs, radiating psychic dread. "This is it," Ilara whispered. "Their crown jewel." The crew watched helplessly as a swarm of Drex fighters scrambled toward them. Ilara's mind raced. The nightmare inside her pulsed with new urgency. She linked once again to the psychic map. Inside the mental realm, Earth was a maze of broken dreams, fragments of war, fear, and resilience interwoven. The Drex had seeded nightmares there long ago, waiting for the moment to unleash a psychic assault. But buried deep were also sparks of defiance, memories of hope, of humanity's stubborn will to survive. Ilara dove into the heart of the nightmare, confronting visions of the Drex invasion, cities burning, skies torn open by alien fleets, families shattered by terror. But among the ashes, she saw something unexpected. Children laughing in ruined parks, survivors building new lives, soldiers standing firm. Earth was not just a target, it was a symbol. Back. On the Wraith, the battle raged fiercely. Ilara's psychic presence disrupted Drex control channels, fracturing their coordination. Fighters faltered. Dreadnought systems blinked with warning. With a sudden roar, the Wraith surged forward, launching an assault on the Dreadnought's core. Explosions rippled across the enemy ship, shattering its psychic fields. As the Dreadnought fell, Ilara felt the nightmare pulse weaken. The Drex had underestimated humanity's spirit. Their nightmares could fuel fear, but they could not snuff out hope. Exhausted but unbroken, Ilara gazed toward Earth's blue-green orb. "This fight isn't just for survival," she said quietly. "It's for the soul of humanity itself." The ruins of New Chicago sprawled beneath a gray, clouded sky, shattered skyscrapers clawing at the horizon, streets cracked and silent, memories buried beneath dust and rubble. Ilara Voss stood at the edge of what had once been the city's heart, the weight of history pressing down like a physical force. This was Earth's legacy, what humanity had lost, what it fought to reclaim. Her footsteps echoed against broken concrete as she moved through the ruins with Reyna and Reyna close behind. Their mission was clear: uncover the Drex remnants that lingered here, ghosts of nightmares seeded decades ago. Ilara's mind, still tethered to the psychic map, felt the pulse of dormant nodes hidden beneath the ruins. The Drex had left traps, mined, prisons waiting to ensnare the unwary. "Be careful," Ilara warned. "The nightmare network here is tangled and deep. It's not just physical danger." They reached a buried data vault, its entrance partially collapsed but still intact. Using a portable plasma cutter, Reyna pried the door open. Inside, rows of ancient servers hummed faintly, forgotten machines storing memories, histories, and nightmares. Ilara connected to the vault's interface, her neural implant syncing with the decaying tech. Images flooded her mind, flashbacks of the Drex invasion, the chaos, the fear, but buried beneath the terror were fragments of resistance, secret codes, encrypted messages, voices of rebels who had fought back. Suddenly, the vault shuddered. The nightmare network had awoken, walls rippled and dissolved into shifting shadows. Figures formed from smoke and light, memories turned to monsters, lunged at the crew. Ilara's heart pounded. The Drex traps were real. With steely resolve, Ilara dove into the psychic realm, confronting the ghosts of Earth's darkest hours. Her mind became a battlefield of echoes. Children's laughter distorted into screams. Soldiers' courage twisted into despair. But she refused to succumb. Harnessing the fragments of hope she had discovered, Ilara crafted barriers of light within. The nightmare. Her will forged pathways through the chaos, unraveling the traps one by one. Back in the real world, Reyna and Reyna fought off shadowy Drex scouts that had emerged from the ruins. Together they secured the vault, shielding Ilara as she finished the data extraction. When Ilara finally emerged, sweat-drenched and trembling, she held in her hands a fragment of humanity's lost history, and a new weapon, Encoded within the data were ancient psychic frequencies capable of disrupting the Drex network. "We have a chance," Ilara said, quietly, "to turn their own nightmare against them." But as they prepared to leave, a sudden tremor rocked the ground. From the shadows, a towering Drex warlord emerged, an embodiment of nightmare given flesh and fury. "Ilara Voss," it growled, voice like grinding stone. "You dare to challenge the harvest?" Ilara's eyes blazed. "This ends now." The Drex warlord loomed over the ruined vault, its massive frame rippling with dark energy, eyes burning with cruel intelligence. The air grew heavy with psychic dread, as if the very atmosphere recoiled from its presence. Ilara Voss stood firm, her breath steady despite the crushing pressure of the nightmare beast before her. This was the culmination of everything, the final test of her will. "Your reign of terror ends here," Ilara declared, her voice steady and fierce. Reyna scrambled to prepare their weapons, but Ilara knew this fight was beyond mere firepower. This was a battle of minds, wills, and the fragile threads of hope woven through years of suffering. She linked once more with the psychic network, drawing on the ancient frequencies she'd recovered. The encoded signals hummed through her neural implant, ready to disrupt the Drex's control. The warlord lunged, its shadowy limbs slashing through the air, aiming to crush her in a single blow. But Ilara's mind expanded, flooding the nightmare realm with bursts of light and defiance. The warlord staggered, howling in rage. She pressed the frequencies deeper into the psychic web, fracturing the warlord's connection to the hive mind, unraveling its control over the nightmare network. Pain flared through Ilara's head as the Drex retaliated, sending waves of terror and despair. Memories of lost comrades, broken cities, and the suffocating darkness of the nightmare realm assaulted her mind. But instead of breaking, Ilara transformed the pain into strength. Her will shone like a beacon in the darkness. Back in the physical world, Reyna provided covering fire, disrupting the Drex's corporeal form with plasma bursts and precise strikes. Every shot was synchronized with Ilara's psychic assault, weakening the warlord's anchor in reality. The battle raged on, a dance of light and shadow, hope and despair. Ilara wove her psychic frequencies into a net of light that ensnared the warlord, draining its power and severing its link to the hive. With a final deafening roar, the warlord dissolved into shards of nightmare, fading into nothingness. Silence fell. The nightmare network flickered and collapsed, the twisted psychic web unraveling across the galaxy. Ilara collapsed, exhausted but victorious. Reyna helped her to her feet, eyes shining with awe. "You did it," she said softly. "You turned their nightmare into their undoing." Ilara smiled faintly, the weight of the journey pressing down but the fire of hope still burning within. "This is just the beginning," Ilara said. "There are more outposts, more nightmares to confront. But now we know we can win." As the Wraith prepared to depart Earth's orbit, Ilara looked out at the stars, each one a beacon of possibility, a promise that humanity's nightmares would no longer define their fate. The dawn light filtered through the viewport of the Wraith, painting the bridge with hues of gold and rose. Ilara Voss sat quietly, her gaze fixed on the vast expanse of stars beyond. The nightmare empire of the Drex had fractured, their psychic network shattered by her defiance. Yet, the weight of the fight still pressed heavily on her shoulders. Beside her, Reyna busied themselves with ship systems, preparing for their next journey. The crew moved with renewed purpose, survivors reborn from the ashes of war. "Ilara," Reyna said softly, breaking the silence. "What now? After all this? What's next for you?" Ilara's eyes flickered with determination. "Now we rebuild. We take back the worlds the Drex tried to claim. We hunt down the remaining nightmare nodes. And most importantly, We protect those who can't protect themselves." Her voice carried a fierce hope. The galaxy might have been plunged into darkness, but humanity, and its allies, would be the light. But even in victory, shadows lingered. The psychic scars Ilara bore were deep. Every time she closed her eyes, echoes of nightmare flickered at the edges of her mind, whispers of the Drex's relentless hunt. She had faced death, madness, and fear itself, and survived. But the question remained, how much of her mind was still truly hers? In the coming weeks, the Wraith became a symbol of resistance. The stories of the human girl who had survived the nightmares and turned the tables on her hunters spread through space like wildfire. Rebel fleets joined. Their cause, old enemies set aside grudges, and across the stars, hope blossomed where despair had once ruled. Yet Ilara knew that the Drex's influence was not easily erased. They had seeded nightmares in countless worlds, their psychic web vast and tangled. Her task was immense. She was no longer just a survivor. She was a guardian of dreams. On a distant world, beneath twin suns, Ilara stood before a gathering of allies, humans, aliens, and those who had long suffered under the Drex yoke. She raised her voice, steady and strong. "The nightmare is over," she said, "but the fight for freedom is just beginning. Together, we will reclaim our future." The crowd erupted in cheers, a chorus of defiance and hope. As the stars turned overhead, Ilara allowed herself a rare moment of peace. The nightmares might always haunt her, but they no longer ruled her. She was a hunter now, a beacon in the darkness. The galaxy had changed, and so had she. The end.